Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise today in opposition to the deal that the Senate is getting ready to vote on. This is a terrible deal. This deal embodies everything about the Washington establishment that frustrates the American people. This deal kicks the can down the road. It allows yet more debt, more deficits, more spending, and it does absolutely nothing to provide relief for the millions of Americans who are hurting because of Obamacare. To all the young people right now coming out of school who can't find a job because of Obamacare, this deal does nothing for them. To all of the single moms who are struggling and being forced into part-time work, trying to feed their kids on 29 hours a week because of Obamacare, this deal does nothing for them. To all of the hard-working families who are right now getting massive premium increases from their health insurance companies and trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet with health insurance going up 100, 200, 300% because of Obamacare, this deal does nothing for them. And to all of the seniors, to all of the people with disabilities who are right now getting in the mail notifications that they're losing their health insurance because of Obamacare, this deal does nothing for them. Mr. President, this fight was always about the American people who are hurting because of Obamacare. And unfortunately, today, the United States Senate is saying, you don't have a voice in Washington. You don't have a voice in Washington. This is a terrible deal. And I urge my colleagues here to oppose it. Now, none of us should be surprised that when the Senate votes, this deal is going to pass. And it's going to pass by a big margin. None of us should be surprised. But, Mr. President, the outcome could have been different. I would ask you, Mr. President, to imagine a different world. We saw in the last 2 months millions of Americans rise up, sign a national petition, light up the phones to the Capitol, and speak up against the enormous harms Obamacare is visiting upon them. We saw the House of Representatives stand with courage and listen to the American people. Mr. President, I ask you to imagine a world in which Senate Republicans united to support House Republicans. Imagine that one piece being different from what we saw. Imagine after the House Republicans stood together with the American people, if all 46 Senate Republicans have stood together and said, we are united against the train wreck that is Obamacare. We are united with the American people that if President Obama is going to give an exemption for big business for members of Congress, that the American people deserve that very same exemption. I want you to imagine, Mr. President, if Senate Republicans have stood together and simply supported House Republicans and the American people. Mr. President, I want you to imagine what would have happened if all 46 Senate Republicans had united and gone together and said, the House of Representatives has passed a bill funding the VA. We should fund the VA. Mr. President, the Senate, the majority leader of the Senate, refused to allow the Senate even to vote to fund the VA. I want you to imagine, Mr. President, all 46 Senate Republicans, if we had stood together and simply supported the House Republicans in saying the House of Representatives has voted to reopen our national parks, to reopen our war memorials, and the majority leader of the Senate refuses to allow the Senate even to vote. Mr. President, I want you to imagine simply that Senate Republicans had stood together and said, we support the House Republicans in standing with the American people. Mr. President, if that had happened, this result, I believe, would have been very, very different. It is heartbreaking to the American people that Senate Republicans, divided as they did, and decided to direct their criticism, direct their attention, direct their cannon fire at House Republicans and at those standing with the American people. But yet at the same time, Mr. President, to the millions of Americans who rose up in the last couple of months, I want to give a word of encouragement. A word of encouragement about the path forward. A couple of months ago, the Washington establishment scoffed at the notion that the American people might rise up. That was viewed as silly, parochial, couldn't happen. A couple of months ago, the Washington establishment scoffed at the notion that the House of Representatives would stand strong saying, we should fund every bit of the federal government, but we shouldn't fund Obamacare. And yet, Mr. President, what we've seen in the last 2 months has been extraordinary. Millions of Americans speaking up in overwhelming numbers, saying Obamacare isn't working. Mr. President, the unions are jumping ship. Democratic members of the Senate and the House went to the President and said, we want to be exempted from Obamacare. This law isn't working. And it is worth reflecting on how extraordinary it is to see the American people rise up in such incredible numbers and to see the House of Representatives engage in what I consider to be a profile in courage, standing with the American people. Now, a path forward, the way we are going to stop Obamacare, the way we are going to stop the suffering, the harms that are being visited on millions of Americans is the path we have seen these past couple of months, is the American people rising up. The answers are not going to come from Washington. Washington is broken, but the answers are going to come from the American people. And so, Mr. President, I am today encouraged. I am encouraged by the millions of Americans who want to get back to our free market principles, get back to the Constitution, and stop this train wreck of a law that is the biggest job killer in this country, that is hurting people all across the country. Mr. President, it is sad that today the United States Senate is telling people all across this country who are struggling, who are trying to provide for their kids, and who are getting notifications in the mail, your health care has been dropped. Now, maybe you have an elderly parent, and that health care policy is providing for your family. Maybe you have children facing debilitating diseases, and yet you're getting a notification in the mail, your health insurance has been dropped because of Obamacare. Mr. President, it is sad that the U.S. Senate says we will do nothing to answer your plight. We created your plight, but we will do nothing. Mr. President, it is sad that when you have James Hoffa, the president of the Teamsters, saying that Obamacare is destroying the health care of millions of working men and women in this country and the families who depend upon them, that the U.S. Senate says we're closed for business, the Washington establishment has exempted itself. So the problems, the suffering of working America is not the concern of the Washington establishment. That is sad. But at the same time, I am optimistic, I am inspired by the millions of Americans who have risen up. And if the American people continue to rise up, I am confident that in time, the U.S. Senate will follow the lead of the House of Representatives and listen to the American people. That is our job. That is our responsibility. This is a terrible deal today, but it's a terrible deal for the American people. But at the same time, the path forward, if the American people continue to rise up, we're going to turn this around. We're going to restore jobs. We're going to restore economic growth. We're going to restore the ability of people who are struggling to climb the economic ladder and to achieve the American dream, and we're going to stop the #1 job killer in this country, that is Obamacare. Mr. President, I rise in opposition to this deal that does not serve the best interest of the men and women each of us represent. I yield the floor.